Okay, hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today at the second in our Starting Your Career graduate careers series. Today's session is on how to choose a career and setting goals. My name is Tom Davis and I'm Graduate Employability Officer at the University of Leeds. We're delighted to be joined today by Sampurna Maitra, who works at Alexander Mann Solutions and is a University of Leeds graduate. As I said, this is the second in this series. We had a session last week on job hunting as a recent graduate, which we hope some of you were able to join us at. That session was recorded, as will this one. We'll send links rounds to both events in an email that we'll send tomorrow. So if you do need to leave the session early for any reason, that's absolutely fine, as it is being recorded. How we're going to work today's session, I'm just going to do a brief introduction of how the session will work and a little bit of a reminder of the support that you can access as a graduate of the University of Leeds from the Careers Centre. After that, Sampurna's got a session that she's going to run through. That'll take about half an hour, and then we'll have time for Q&A, which will follow on from that. There was the opportunity to submit questions when you registered for this session. So we've got those through. Some of them will be covered in the session, and I'll be asking a couple of those to kick off the Q&A. If you haven't submitted a question already, or you realise there's one that you'd like to ask that you haven't asked already, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Pop your question in there. You've also got the ability to like any questions on there that other people have asked. So if you see one that you think you were going to ask, or that you think, actually, yeah, I'd really like that one covered, just give that a like, and that will give us a sense of sort of what the most pressing questions are. Sampurna is an international graduate of University of Leeds who's currently working in the UK, which I'm sure will be of great interest to some of you. What we'll do with the Q&A, we have got some questions submitted already on that topic. We'll start with sort of more general topics, and we'll then move on to cover questions from an international perspective, just so that if there's any UK graduates attending who that's not so relevant for, they've got the opportunity to leave. But Sampurna is more than happy to cover those topics, so don't be worried about that. But before we begin, we thought it might be useful just to have a quick question, get you guys warmed up and find out where you're up to at the moment. So we've got a poll coming up that should be appearing on screen at the moment. So yeah, it's just, if you could just let us know which of these sort of most accurately reflect where you're up to at the moment and where you are as you attend this webinar. So we'll just give you 10 seconds or so to answer that. Okay, shall we see how the results are looking? Okay, so a bit of a mix. People in a job but currently looking for a different job, kind of the most popular answer there. I'm currently out of work, looking for another job. A few people considering further study or taking time out. Yeah, it's really useful to get a sense of where people are up to at the moment. So thanks a lot for answering that. The good news is that wherever you're up to at the moment, we can continue to support you at the Careers Centre. So there's lots of different ways you can access that support and different ways you can do that, which hopefully different ways are relevant for different people. The first thing to do is to re-register as a graduate on My Career. I'm sorry, these links don't seem to have come out particularly clearly again, but these will be emailed around again, so don't worry if you can't see them. Yeah, first thing to do is to re-register as a graduate on My Career. So My Career, if you used it as a student, it's the careers portal that we use for all of our appointments, events and online vacancies. Re-register as a graduate on My Career and you'll have access to all of that again as you did as a student. It takes 30 seconds and you'll be approved within a couple of days. What else was I going to say there? Oh yeah, events are particularly relevant this year because with everything that's currently going on, we've shifted all our events for this term online, including careers fairs. So there's actually a really good opportunity to get involved with that in a way that you perhaps wouldn't have been able to during a normal year. The Class 2020 website, that's useful whether you're a Class of 2020 graduate or you graduated before. There's useful resources to support you with your job search, no matter what stage you're at with your career planning. We've just revamped that website actually, so you can click on the most relevant career step for you. So a bit like that question, you can access the support that's most relevant for you. LinkedIn Learning, we now have graduate access for 6 months for that, which is a new thing for this year. If you haven't heard of LinkedIn Learning, it's a spin-off of the online networking professional site I'm sure you're all aware of, which is a learning platform. It's got lots of different online courses and ability to learn different skills. It's a really good way if you're currently out of work, or if you're in work and you feel like you're just lacking one or two of the key skills that you need to get into your chosen profession. Really good way of doing that. So yeah, well worth having a look at. And finally, from me, just to make you aware that the Leeds internship program is also an option, and it's well worth looking at whether you're currently in work or looking for work. Well worth having a look at. The Leeds internships program is exclusive paid graduate opportunities that are only advertised to University of Leeds graduates. The opportunities are advertised on My Career, so you'll need to just register as a graduate and look for the Leeds internship program there. Because of the nature of it, where it is exclusive opportunities, we tend to have only a few on at a time. So at the moment, we've got the 2 vacancies there in digital marketing and finance that we're advertising. We've got a lot more coming at the end of September and early October. Yeah, so that's well worth keeping an eye on. Even if you don't see anything on there when you first log on, well worth signing up to get updates on that and following relevant social media channels and that sort of thing. Because if you do see a position that you like, the fact that it's only University of Leeds graduates can be a real boost. That's probably enough from me for now. Without further ado, I'll hand over to our main speaker, who's Sampurna Maitra, who will lead you through her session. Over to you, Sam.
Hi, thank you so much, Tom. Hi, everyone. Really, really nice to be back here, giving something back to the University of Leeds community. I really, really enjoyed my time there. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to come back and engage with the university's, kind of graduate population in this way. So just a really quick introduction of who I am. So I went to Leeds University Business School in 2013, 2014. I did an MSc in organizational psychology. I have about 5 years experience working in HR roles in India and in the UK. For the last 3 years, about 3 years now, I've been working for Alexander Mann Solutions in their talent development team, which is a kind of subsection of people and culture, also known as human resources. My experience is pretty broad, so I have experience across talent management, performance management, organizational development, recruitment, employee engagement. So in particular, I think my work with talent management, high potentials in organizations, and developing people's careers and kind of personal strengths, that's kind of what I've drawn on for this session. So hopefully I can share some hints and tips with you on that front. But equally, I think it wasn't that long ago that I was in your shoes. It's only been a few years since I was looking for jobs in earnest here in the UK as an international candidate. And so I've kind of got some anecdotal advice to share with you on that front as well. So I'll take you through really quickly what we'll cover today. So we'll start off with some questions that you'll want to consider when you're choosing a career. Equally, these questions can apply if you're shifting careers as well. We'll talk a little bit about what to keep in mind when you're setting career goals for yourself and things to keep in mind when you're actually out there applying for jobs. We're in a very kind of volatile and uncertain kind of situation right now. Companies are having to pivot really quickly to respond to the current circumstances. And so we'll talk a bit about some of those emerging trends in graduate hiring and hiring in general that you might want to know about when you're kind of looking for jobs. We'll talk a little bit about some of those skills and competencies that employers are looking for in their graduates. We'll talk about how to differentiate yourself as an exceptional graduate candidate, and then I'll signpost you to some online resources that can help you kind of prepare for the job hunting process, and specifically for graduate job searching. And then once I'm done with that, hopefully next 20-25 minutes, then we'll open up to questions, as Tom mentioned. So what should you be considering when you're trying to choose a career, or when you're reflecting upon, kind of what your strengths are, what your motivators are, what your values are, if you're looking to kind of change roles as well, or change career tracks. So the first question that you need to ask yourself is, what is your personal brand? So what are you good at? What do you bring to the table? So you need to understand what your strengths are, your skills, your accomplishments, in particular, what sets you apart. If you don't have a ton of work experience yet, if you've been studying pretty much your entire life up to this point, don't worry, that doesn't mean that you're unemployable. So try and think about your extracurriculars. So were you in a club or a society? Did you play competitive team sports? Have you volunteered with a local organization? All of these are opportunities where you're constantly building your skills. So think about how you can frame these experiences in a compelling way on your CV, so you can show a prospective employer that you have these transferable skills and that you have that proactive drive that they're going to really value. When you're thinking about your personal brand, a good exercise is to always identify the top 3 abilities and qualities that you think you're best known for. And then it's always a good idea to kind of sense check these strengths with people who are close to you. So talk to your friends, your classmates, colleagues, parents, teachers, anyone who's had the chance to observe you or to work closely with you. Towards the end of the presentation, I'll give you the names of a few online strengths assessments that you can take as well. Self-awareness is something that is really, really helpful when you're kind of going into the job hunting process, whether you're a recent graduate or not. So it's always a good idea to have a really strong handle on what your strengths are. The second thing you want to consider is, what do you enjoy doing? So what kind of work energizes you? So it could be anything. Do you enjoy leading, selling, analyzing, collaborating, operating machinery, working with your hands, helping other people, solving puzzles, talking face-to-face with people? So really consider what are those activities that really energize you. The next thing you want to consider is, what are your values? So what gives you purpose? What kind of work motivates you and gives you meaning? What is important for you to feel happy and fulfilled at work? So what are you passionate about? So it's really important that you understand what you value at work and in life in general, because it can help you choose the type of role, the type of company and industry that's right for you. So do some of that soul searching and self-reflection before you start applying, because it can really help you build a more targeted application strategy. Equally though, I just want to remind you that if you don't land your dream job right away, don't worry, okay? Don't be discouraged. Most people are going to have up to 3 different careers and multiple jobs over the course of their lifetime. It's really rare nowadays for people to kind of join a job as soon as they get out of university and then stay in that job for the remainder of their entire career. So, the timing might not be right at the moment, but things will recover. So if you don't land your dream job, don't worry. Just be pragmatic, find experience that you can springboard from and try and build those transferable skills. Your first job is not going to be your last job, and you're going to have plenty of opportunities to reinvent yourself and pivot your career in the desired direction. The next thing you want to consider is, what type of job is right for you? So, there are a few different kinds of graduate jobs. So you've got graduate programs, you've got kind of standalone, standard entry-level jobs, and then you've got gig work as well. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept of a graduate program, and I certainly was, because it's not very common in India where I'm from, but it is very, very common here in the UK. So a graduate program is basically a structured business training program, which is set over a defined period of time. You will have certain key learning milestones. You'll probably have kind of a strong mentorship element. You'll do several rotations, probably get some global exposure, and really kind of build that business insight and commercial acumen. So it's kind of what organizations do to grow their own talent from within. So, you know, graduate programs are great, but they're not the only option, and they may not necessarily be the right option for you. You know, in general, they're really difficult to get into. Only a very small percentage get through, even in a normal year. This year, the challenges are even greater. The field is very crowded due to high levels of unemployment among kind of people in the 18 to 24-year age group. So you may want to consider whether graduate programs are the right choice for you, because it's even more competitive than in a normal year this year. So, you know, just kind of thinking about some of those other options. So you might desire a little bit more flexibility because you might want to continue your learning, or you might have caring responsibilities, or the sector that you want to work in just isn't hiring graduates right now. And so in this case, gig work might be the answer for you, or freelance work might be the answer for you. So whether that's a side hustle or working kind of as, you know, as your own boss, try and explore some of those online marketplaces and on-demand apps. So I've kind of signposted some websites that you can go to find kind of platforms that advertise gig work as well. So we'll go through that kind of when we go through the resources. And then, you know, kind of once you've done some of that introspection and you have an idea of what you enjoy, what you're good at, try and research some of those industries and companies really thoroughly if you want to look at standalone entry-level roles. So kind of trade magazines, reputable industry rankings are always a really great place to start. Remember, you don't always have to go for the biggest players. Smaller companies, startups, boutique firms, these can also be excellent places to work. Pedigree isn't everything. So, you know, the big four accounting firms or the big three consulting firms, they're not the only amazing employers. You know, I'd just like to share kind of a little tidbit with you, just kind of to support the fact that this is a great time to be applying for, you know, jobs in small businesses. So from June to August 2020, there were an estimated kind of 434,000 vacancies in the UK, which is almost 30% higher than the low that we experienced in April to June this year. And the increase was primarily driven by small businesses with less than 50 employers. So you might, you know, strongly want to consider whether there are some of those kind of boutique firms out there that would meet your kind of needs as well. So next, we're going to move on to some kind of key tips to keep in mind when you're setting career goals and when you're actually applying for jobs. So first of all, you know, make sure that you do take some time out to do that introspection and to write them down, you know, document those values, motivators, and strengths, and kind of be clear where you want to be in the short term. Really important to set achievable incremental goals when it comes to developing your own skills and experience. So, you know, try and be as specific as you can, don't be vague, and try not to shoot for the moon, because you will probably find it quite difficult and then you'll get discouraged. So you be reasonable. So try and think about what employers are looking for in the specific industries that you're interested in. Okay, so what are those emerging skills that are really going to set you apart from other people? So it could be data analytics, coding, Agile and Scrum methodology. So, you know, do some research into those specific industries. And in the short term, try and focus on building those skills. You know, Tom mentioned LinkedIn Learning. There are lots of other kind of upskilling platforms, you know, Coursera, edX, Khan Academy. The options are just literally limitless. So, you know, look into that and invest in yourself by building those skills. For those of you, and there are several of you on the call who are already kind of in a job, let's say you're in an individual contributor role and you want to move into a managerial role. So try and put your hand up for stretch projects. So talk to your boss about how you can manage your kind of business as usual workload to try and, get yourself onto some of those projects that, where you can show experience of managing other people in a matrix environment or supporting peers in a project, that kind of thing, that will help you get that management experience before you're necessarily officially a manager. Remember that developing yourself isn't just about plugging skills and experience gaps. It's also about getting even better at stuff you're already good at. So, if you've done that initial reflection, you should already know what your natural strengths are. So make sure that at least one or two of your short-term incremental goals are centered around building those natural strengths. The next piece is set time limits for your goals. So it can be really hard to see progress when it's a long-term goal over several months. So set time limits, break down those broader goals into small steps, make sure you're tracking your progress. So write things down, even if it's, 5 minutes at the end of the day, 2 lines in a journal saying, this is what I learned today, or this is what I did today. Make sure that you track that and celebrate those small wins. So when you hit a milestone, pat yourself on the back and say, yes, I did that. So, for example, if your goal is to learn how to code in Python, let's say in 6 months, then you can, to prepare you for a career in data analytics, then enumerate those key milestones, celebrate when you reach each one. When you can see consistent progress against goals, you're a lot more likely to follow through on those goals. So the next piece to remember is it's good to aim high, but make sure to aim smart. So be ambitious, but be reasonable. So for example, if you meet 80% of the required criteria for a dream job posting, go ahead and apply, even if you're missing some bits and pieces that they're asking for. But don't apply for jobs that are clearly meant for experienced hires with kind of skill sets that you just don't possess yet. Focus yourself, so try and limit the number of goals that you set to no more than 5 overall. Be targeted and be structured in your job applications. Apply to jobs that fit your interests and your skill set. Don't just apply for anything and everything in a panic. Relevance is really, really key. It is important. It is a numbers game, so it is important to apply for a large quantity of jobs, but make sure that you're being really, really targeted in the quality of jobs and the relevance of the jobs that you're applying for as well. A good idea is to sign up for job alerts with all of the major job boards, so you can put in certain kind of keywords and they'll send you an alert every time jobs are posted with those words in them. Another kind of tip is track the status of your applications in an Excel sheet. So if you're doing dozens of applications over the course of several months, you will likely be at different stages with different companies. And tracking all of that, the status of those applications, will make sure that you don't miss online testing deadlines, you don't miss scheduled interviews. And another great thing is that when you become better at interviews and assessments, if you have a tracker, you'll be able to see an improvement in the number of callbacks you're getting over time as well. So job hunting can be really exhausting and really draining, and it can often feel like things aren't moving forward at pace. So it's really, really important to take some action every day, no matter how small, to keep that process of applying for jobs or that process of kind of learning going. Remember that done is better than perfect, and something is better than nothing. So do something, even if it's really small, every day. When you're looking kind of beyond yourself and your own habits when it comes to setting career goals and applying for jobs, it's really, really important to research the culture of the organization. So most companies will be really clear about what their employee value proposition is. So think about whether the organization is aligned with your values, whether that's kind of moral, social justice, fairness, what are they doing to tackle the gender pay gap? What are they doing, from a diversity and inclusion perspective? So, think about the things that are really important to you. So going back to those values, and make sure that when you are applying to an organization, the culture of the organization aligns with your values, because that would be, that would be a match made in heaven. And also when you go into the interview, let's say, it will hold you in really, really good stead, because it'll show that you actually care about their vision, and that's always a great thing. The next piece is that networking is so powerful. So it can be a really great means of finding a mentor, getting advice on the industry or the career paths that you're considering, getting a referral for the right role, and so on. So talk to your parents, your friends, your classmates. But if you don't have a strong network, then don't worry. You're not at a disadvantage. You shouldn't be afraid of proactively building one. Okay, so you'd be surprised how often people respond to genuine interest and vulnerability. So just ask, basically. So when you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn, take the time to kind of research the person and make a polite, considered, intelligent request. Don't just send a stock message, because they will know and they will reject your request. Make sure to point out why you'd like to connect, if there's anything you can offer them, and kind of what you're seeking from them as well. So don't be afraid to build your network. It's never too late to start. And the kind of final thing that I'd like to say on this piece is that job hunting can be really discouraging, particularly if you don't get feedback after rejection. I think particularly with graduate roles, there's a lot of automation in the process because it's volume hiring. And so you will often not get specific feedback. But often, if you ask the recruiter for feedback, they will give it to you, even if it's not there specifically in the rejection email that you get. So if you get rejected, ask for feedback. Remember not to internalize those rejections, so don't take them personally. There are literally dozens of reasons that are not intrinsic to your candidature, that have nothing to do with you, that might lead to a rejection. So, use any feedback that you get as a learning opportunity. And if you find yourself on the verge of burning out, then remember to take a step back and make time to relax, do something that makes you happy. One thing that I've at least not heard many people mentioning when it comes to building your career goals is making sure that you're taking care of your mental health, your physical health. It's so important, because job hunting is very draining. So make sure that you do take a step back and you do take care of yourself, because that'll make sure that you're kind of on your A game and you're able to be effective and productive during this entire process. We're going to move on to talk a little bit about the current circumstances and what you should keep in mind when you're job hunting in this kind of post-COVID world. So the first thing is that it is a tough market. There are higher rates of unemployment among young people right now in the UK. There are fewer opportunities. Lots of companies have frozen hiring, and therefore there is more competition. There is more of a need to differentiate yourself from other people. So you've got to try and be creative when you're thinking about the ways in which you can really make your CV and yourself stand out. There is a divide in terms of industries. So some companies aren't offering graduate programs anymore, like they've stalled them for the foreseeable. Some have delayed them by 6 months. Some are going ahead as normal, but they've shifted everything online. I would say avoid some sectors right now that are really suffering, let's say retail and aviation. Instead, try and go for sectors like, let's say, healthcare, banking, pharma, if you're looking at graduate programs. The next piece is that remote and agile working are becoming increasingly prevalent. So, don't be afraid to choose that if that's the right choice for you. Lots of companies have kept internships, apprenticeships, graduate programs. They've moved them online for the time being. So be prepared to work from home if needed. Most of the kind of hiring process is going to be quite digital as well. So companies were actually already moving to digitalize and automate their hiring processes, but that trend has basically been accelerated completely by this kind of social distancing and lockdown restrictions. So some things you can expect, video interviews. So that's basically when there's a question on screen and you are talking at the screen, but there is no person on the other end of the screen when your answers are being recorded. Online psychometric assessments, that's quite a traditional part of graduate hiring in general. So, you can expect situational judgment tests, personality tests, kind of aptitude tests, that kind of thing. You may encounter kind of AI screening and chatbots. You may encounter gamification as part of the kind of screening process. So, if you're not clear about what you can expect from the process, then do make sure to ask the recruiter about what to expect. You can find tips on video interviews from providers like HireVue and Sonru. So again, I've mentioned them in the resources slide at the end. With the renewed focus on diversity and inclusion, there's a real shift towards strengths-based interviews because they create a level playing field from a D&I perspective. So what they do is that they, unlike competency-based interviews, they de-emphasize past experience and they focus more on what the candidates enjoy doing, what they're good at. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are several free strengths-based assessments available online, so you might want to try them out to kind of increase your self-awareness. And then finally, companies are really focused right now on how people have responded to the unprecedented challenges of this time. So they're really likely to be interested in what you've done this year that's shown adaptability, resilience. So, did you volunteer in your community? Did you learn something new? Did you go traveling? Did you adopt a pet? What did you do during this time to kind of enrich yourself and enrich your life and respond with resilience to this situation? So these experiences can not only serve as really great CV fillers, they're also proof that you're industrious during a resilient time, and they can differentiate you from other candidates as well. So technical skills will basically vary from industry to industry, and technical skills can be taught anyway. One thing that is probably common from a technical perspective, though, is digital upskilling. So make sure that you are at par in terms of digital literacy with your peers, and make sure that if there are any digital skills that you can see kind of coming up on the horizon over the next, let's say, 5 years or so, that are hot skills, so to speak, like data analytics, for example, then make sure that you're taking steps to kind of educate yourself on those pieces as well. What I will kind of highlight here is that a lot of graduate employers will be looking for certain innate potential and soft skills. So what do we mean by that? What we mean by that is social skills, emotional skills that they're going to want to assess through psychometric tests and competency-based or strengths-based interviews during the graduate hiring process. So I've just listed a few that I think are really, really essential, and I think most employers are going to want these in their graduates regardless of industry. So the biggest one is probably collaborating across multidisciplinary global teams. So you're likely going to be working with dispersed teams. You're likely going to be working across people who belong to different cultures, different countries and backgrounds. And you're going to be working with people in different functions, particularly if you're working kind of in a project-based role or in a kind of consulting-based role. So it's really important that you can collaborate across these multidisciplinary kind of global teams, and it's really important that you can influence people and get work done even if you don't have formal power over them, if that makes sense. Resilience, as I mentioned, agility. So the word agile is mentioned a lot. What does it actually mean? It means knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. So employers aren't going to expect you to come into the role knowing everything. What they will want, though, is that you'll have a growth mindset. So you'll believe in your ability to change and grow and become more intelligent in the way that you work. They will want you to be intellectually curious. So if you don't know how to do something, go figure it out. you know, and they will want you to kind of be really, really adaptable to changing circumstances. So these are just a few kind of that I think are really important. How to differentiate yourself. So the first piece is probably to tailor your applications to the role and company. So try and dump everything that you have done into a long form CV, and you can draw from that, to create kind of shorter tailored versions of your CV depending on the type of role you're applying for. So make sure that you have a summary profile on the top of your CV, just like 3 to 4 sentences, no more than that. And make sure that in that profile you're incorporating buzzwords from the job description of the job that you're applying for. That'll ensure that if there is any AI screening, that you will pass that. So remember that your CV, let's say 1 to 2 pages, no more than that, really precious real estate. Okay, so use it wisely. Focus less on what you did and more on what you achieved when putting bullet points in your CV. Try and quantify achievements wherever you can. Okay. Use your extracurriculars to tell a story. So like I said, they will be your differentiator. So if you did volunteer or if you did, you know, kind of sports and that kind of thing, put it in there. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date. That is one of the first things the recruiter is going to look at, and make sure there is a link to your LinkedIn profile in your CV. Prepare really, really thoroughly for interviews and assessment centers. If this is your first time going to an assessment center, make sure that you ask the recruiter about the format so that you know what to expect. You can practice psychometric tests and you can get better at them. I know this because I was terrible at abstract reasoning tests, and I practiced and I actually managed to pass them. So numerical reasoning too. So, you know, make sure you know what to expect so you can go in there and really put your best foot forward. Make sure that you go in prepared with knowledge about the company. So what it does, its mission, its values, all of that. So ask incisive questions, be prepared with questions that show that you've done your research and that you're genuinely interested in working for them. You'll want to keep abreast of the latest news in the industries and the companies that you're interested in. So commercial acumen is absolutely one of the biggest things that companies look for in their graduates. So, you know, you can show your understanding of a company's competitor landscape to demonstrate your commercial acumen kind of during those interviews. You know, if you're doing a lot of reading, if you're doing a lot of learning, then you might choose to be a content creator. So write a Medium post or a LinkedIn post, you know, to kind of put forward your views. You know, I think that shows real proactive drive. So that's always desirable. And, you know, make sure that you put any of those kind of Coursera, edX courses that you've done on your CV. Successful completion of self-paced courses, they don't just give you important skills, they also show that you have the drive and determination to actually follow through on that learning. And then the final thing is be authentic. So don't try and be someone that you aren't in an interview. If you pretend, I promise you, hiring managers will see through it. So be your authentic self, just go in prepared. It's normal to be nervous, it's okay to be nervous. But if you go in prepared, after a point, your heart will stop racing and you will do well. Just remember that there is space for all kinds of people at work, introverts, extroverts, everyone in between. So, you know, reflect on who you are, reflect on who that authentic self is, and, you know, bring that to the table. And I promise you that that will hold you in good stead when you're interviewing face-to-face with somebody. And that's kind of it, really. I'm not going to kind of read through the resources, but some of the things that I've put up there are places, you know, company websites that you might want to Google to practice psychometric assessments, to, you know, get free or paid strengths assessments, where you can go to find gig work, virtual internships, virtual mentoring, advice on video interviews, and then job boards as well. So many of these you'll already know about, like Reed, Monster, Glassdoor, all of that. But there are 2 or 3 that are like specifically tailored to graduates. So those are Target Jobs and GradCracker. So you might want to look into them as well. So I think that's it from me. I think we're going to move into questions now.
Yeah, so let's move into questions. Thank you very much for a very interesting and I hope useful presentation there, Sam. As I said, we had a few pre-submitted questions, so I'm going to start with a couple of those. I can see we are receiving a few through the Q&A function on here as well. So thank you very much for them. Do keep them coming while we start with our first couple of questions. As I said, we'll kind of try and use the remaining time split into two between general topics and then into international graduate visa-based questions. So yeah, that's how we'll work it. So first question from the pre-submitted questions is, how would you recommend looking for a job role that encompasses the elements we've enjoyed studying from our degree, and whether that's undergrad or master's?
That's a great question. So I can tell you about kind of how I went about it. So I basically looked at the modules that I enjoyed the most. That was the most obvious place to start. And so I really enjoyed, kind of the more practical focused kind of consulting elements of the modules that I did, because obviously my degree was very applied psychology. And so, think about what you enjoy the most. If you can reflect on those three kind of pieces, what motivates you, what are your strengths, what are your values, then it will immediately become very apparent to you which among your modules kind of matches up with your motivators, your strengths, and your values. So I'd say that's probably the first place to start. See your module, see what you're most interested in terms of the subject matter. And then what you'll want to do is probably go see some of those industry rankings, go see some of those trade magazines. Let's say for the world of recruitment process outsourcing, which is basically what my company does, the Baker's Dozen does an annual ranking that's done by RPO customers. And it shows, the top 10 or top 15, whatever, RPO companies in the UK and globally, right? So, those kind of peer-to-peer rankings or kind of client rankings, those are really, really great places to start, because you'll know that these companies are great at what they do. So, there are lots of rankings, for example, of like boutique management consulting firms, like a Deloitte or a BCG isn't your only port of call, for example. So that's kind of where I'd start, and then start whittling it down based on the various kind of other pieces, like location and environment and the kind of, whether it's a graduate program or standalone role, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, the think about skills as well. So if if there wasn't a specific skill you learn, or you don't know, think about what the aspects were you enjoyed. So did you enjoy the research? Did you enjoy more the group working? Things like that. There's more than one way to look at it, and it all depends on what course you did and whether there's specific things or just generally. So yeah, I think your advice was really good. Let's move on to our second pre-submitted question, which is, are there any specific differences between the way one should market themselves to employers with an undergraduate degree versus a postgraduate degree?
To be honest with you, not particularly. I think particularly because a UK master's is a one-year master's, unless you've been working during your master's or you've done kind of consulting work or other kind of practical applied projects during your dissertation or that kind of thing, I don't really see there being a massive difference. My general advice would be the same, whether you're, kind of graduating from your bachelor's or your master's. And in fact, a lot of this stuff would apply to experienced hires as well. It's not just for graduates.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go with one more question from the pre-submitted. This was actually something we covered at last week's session a little bit, but I think it's still a very relevant question for here. And I might expand it open a bit just to incorporate your experience as an international student applying in the UK. But how do you deal with rejection and unsuccessful applications, and how do you keep your confidence up when you are submitting things and you're not hearing anything back?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it sucks. I mean, that's the first thing, you're right? Like just acknowledging that it's not It's not great. I have a real bone to pick with companies that don't send feedback to graduate students. I think it's terrible. But the first thing I would say is that ask for feedback, right? Don't see that rejection email and go, woe is me, that's it, and, end of. Actually reach out to the recruiter and ask for feedback. More often than not, they will give it to you. The second thing I'd say is don't internalize it. Don't take it personally. There are so many things that, you need to factor in when you're screening candidates. You might not have had one buzzword and the AI might have removed your CV from the pile, or the field is really crowded and therefore when you have 3,000 applicants for 30 positions, the competition is so high that maybe you didn't get in, or maybe the particular commercial acumen that you showed in the interview wasn't quite what they were looking for. But that there are so many different factors. The hiring manager woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day. So don't internalize it, right? Don't take that rejection and think, and this is a mistake that I made, think that all my education and all my efforts are for nothing if I can't get a job. Take any feedback that you're getting, or even if you don't get feedback, take what you think intuitively you're kind of doing right or wrong, and then build on it, learn from it, and just get better. And I promise you, once you've done like a few dozen applications, you will see yourself getting better. You'll see your cover letters getting shorter, crisper, smoother. You'll see that you're building up a repository of CVs. So for example, when I was applying, I had a recruitment focused CV, I had a consulting focused CV, I had an HR operations focused CV, and that's how I kind of built out different kinds of CVs. And that only happened as I did more and more applications. You know what I mean? So don't get discouraged. More often than not, it's not you, and where it is you, the power is completely within your hands to take those learnings and apply them. So you will get a job. And the only other thing that I'd say here is, if the first job isn't the dream job, if it isn't the perfect job, don't give up. That's okay. You can always reinvent yourself. You can always take your career in a completely different direction later on. This is not the be all and end all. Your first job is not your last job. So, don't worry, is what I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good advice. I think just to very briefly add my 2 bits, I think the bit about if you don't receive specific feedback or it's not very helpful, using your own self-feedback is a really useful way of looking at things. Look back at the job application, make sure you save it before you submit it. If it's through an online platform, and be critical, think about what you can improve. But also, it is such a cliche to say, but it will turn around, it will get better. It might take longer at the moment.
Yeah.
It's a hard recruitment market at the moment, but you've
got to be patient, even more so than in a usual year right now, because the market is very crowded and it's very competitive right now. So it'll take time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, let's move into some of the questions we've had submitted on the day. So just taking a look at what's got the most upvotes. Yeah, this is an interesting question, I thought. You talked about LinkedIn Learning and building a network, and I think we talk about LinkedIn Learning a lot, but the question here is from an anonymous attendee is how to use LinkedIn Learning effectively and frequently. So not just the building of the profile, but how do you use it frequently when you're a job hunter?
So I'd say the first thing to do would probably be to identify what are those skills that employers are looking for in general in terms of soft skills. And if there are things that you can learn, there are some amazing, really like short, incisive courses and videos on LinkedIn Learning about things like, mindfulness, conflict resolution, like building commercial acumen, things like that. So, the first thing is kind of identifying what some of those organizations are looking for, and then basically tailoring a learning plan for yourself using LinkedIn Learning. I think it's a really intuitive platform. It's really, really good. So I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier, which is that do something every day, even if it's a 10-minute video on LinkedIn Learning. If you can tick that off your list, and if you can watch it 10 minutes, literally like while you're eating lunch, that's still something that you've learned today that you didn't know yesterday. Do you know what I mean? So even if it's really small and really incremental, I'd say, do some learning every day. and be sure to build a plan that's relevant to your skill set, to your interests, and building on your strengths, but equally trying to fill some of those knowledge gaps. Let's say that some of those employers and industries that you're interested in are looking for.
Yep, really good answer. Thank you. Okay, let's have a look. Are you comfortable talking about recruitment agencies at all? Do you know much about that? We've got a question here about recruitment.
Yeah. So
the question, specifically the question was, I've been contacted by several of them, but heard nothing back to discuss after discussing a role. Should I treat the call like an interview with potential employers, but also just any general thoughts on recruitment agencies?
Yeah, so the thing with recruitment agencies is that they are not the employer. Okay, that's the key thing to remember. It is in their interest to sell you to the employer, right? Because if they sell you to the employer, they get a commission if you get the job. So don't be too intimidated by them is the first thing I'd say, because it is in their interest to help you. And the second thing I'd say is try and find out if there are specific graduate recruitment agencies or even more kind of hyper-specific recruitment agencies that are specific to the industry that you're applying for. Okay, and again, you'll want to look at kind of industry rankings, or kind of, even if you look at like kind of SEO rankings on Google, the ones that are most used will probably be the ones that show up on the first page of Google. So let's say you want to work in like banking, right? So a search that you might do in Google is, graduate banking recruitment agencies or specialist graduate banking recruitment agencies. And so, if you put in some of those keywords, then you will inevitably find some of those. And I'd say probably register your CV with several recruitment agencies, and don't get too worried if they don't like immediately contact you or whatever. They'll probably shelve your CV, and the minute something relevant comes up, they will get back in touch with you, and they will, kind of actively court you. And so the way around this is to make sure that you have got your finger in several pies effectively, and just put your CV out there, different versions of your CV with like kind of different recruiters. So let's say, if I can speak from an HR perspective, when I wanted to get into recruitment specifically, I sent my recruiter CV to recruitment or like HR hiring specialist agencies, and then I sent a separate one out to consulting specialist agencies. So, you'll want to be really targeted and kind of strategic in the way that you do that. But yeah, you don't necessarily need to go for like the big names like a Hayes or a Reed. They aren't your only port of call. In fact, if anything, I'd say it's possible that you might get a more personalized hiring experience if you go with a smaller agency. It's possible.
Yeah, really good advice. There's also a website which I cannot for the life of me remember the name of. I think it might be Agency Central, which lists, it's like a directory of broken down in sector.
That's a good shout.
And that's a really useful resource. But yeah, absolutely, don't ignore the smaller ones. But yeah, do be professional. As you said, it's not the employer, but it's still a professional context, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to treat it like a job interview, but make sure that you know what's on your CV. Do you know what I mean? Like, make sure your CV is up to date. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Make sure you can talk confidently about it. And I know I've harped on about this, but this is why kind of knowing your strengths and knowing, creating an elevator pitch is a really, really good idea. Because when you're talking to recruiters, the first question they're going to ask you is like, tell me a little bit about yourself, walk me through your CV. So, if you can get your elevator pitch down to like 30 seconds of, these are my top 3 strengths, this is what I'm bringing to the table, this is why you should hire me. You need to sell yourself before they can sell you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, really good advice. That question from Anshika, who says, how long should I spend on researching a company before the interview? I suspect there's no answer to that. So what should they be researching is probably.
Yeah, that's a really yeah. So I personally spent probably at least a whole day spread out over several days. Researching, particularly if it's an assessment center with an interview component, I'd say the bare minimum that you need to do is spend a whole day kind of researching, taking notes, preparing for the interview. So in terms of things that you should be researching, absolutely look at the commercial context within which the company is functioning. So who are their competitors? What are any strategy documents that they've made public? Are they in the news? What's happening in the wider industry? What are the trends that might impact them as an organization, and therefore what are the sorts of things that they're going to be considering going forward? So yeah, so the commercial context is absolutely key. The second thing you'll want to look at is kind of their values and any behavioral frameworks that they've made public. Usually, particularly for graduate hiring, they will make it public because they want graduates to be able to come prepared into those interviews. And again, like I said, there is a shift, I think, away from competency-based interviewing to strengths-based interviewing, but it's always a really, really good idea to kind of employ that STAR method. So the situation, task, action, result method in structuring the examples that you have. So take a look at your CV, and before your interview, spend some time linking the company's behaviors and values to your specific experience. Yeah, so that's something that's always really, really helped, because it'll mean that when you're asked a question, let's say you're asked, give me an example of a time when you collaborated effectively in a team. Yeah, then you will have that answer at the top of your mind and you'll be able to answer succinctly. That's the most important thing. What else should you be researching? You might want to look at the LinkedIn profile of the person who's interviewing you, so the hiring manager themselves, so that you can personalize the conversation. And who knows, maybe you have a university in common, or maybe you're from the same town, so it's always a good idea to look at their LinkedIn profile of the hiring manager. It's also a good idea to look at the profiles of graduates who were hired into the company, or to look at people who kind of are in the function that you're applying for, and what sorts of work they've done that you can see on LinkedIn. So senior people usually won't have paragraphs and paragraphs written on LinkedIn, but even so, you should go check them out, see the sorts of kind of career paths, career progression that's available in there, because that's always a really good thing to ask about, because it shows that well, first of all, it shows that you've done your research. And second of all, it shows that you're actually interested in building a career within this organization, and you're curious about what career tracks there are available for you, what opportunities for progression, learning, growth are available to you. So it's always a really good idea to go and research, beyond what they put on their company website. And of course, like, that's the first thing, read the company website back to front, right? But yeah, go onto LinkedIn and check the profiles of those people. And if you're feeling confident, reach out to them and say, I have an interview coming up for your function. I'm interviewing as a graduate in your function. Do you have any tips? Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing? It's never a bad idea. I mean, the worst that can happen is they're going to say no, right? So just ask.
Yeah, all really good advice there. I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I think just to add with the how long should I spend on researching a company, kind of ask yourself, it's when you feel confident.
Yeah.
I've interviewed for different things. Somewhere I've had absolutely no idea about it before, and somewhere I've known a little bit. It's very different how long it's taken me to get to the point where I feel comfortable going in for the interview. So it's when you're at the stage where you feel like you know how you're going to answer questions, and that you'll feel adept answering anything that comes up. So yeah, thanks for that question, Anshika. Okay, we've got a question here. It's the most voted up question of the ones submitted, and it's quite a nice segue between our general questions and international, because it's kind of there's two components to it. It's from an anonymous attendee who I assume is a non-UK female, but judging on her question, it's so any tips for gaining professional confidence when entering the job market for the first time, which is very relevant for probably everyone in this session, if not the vast majority. And they go on to say, especially for a non-UK native female who's a bit intimidated and worried about discrimination.
Yeah.
Quite a lot to pack in there.
Yeah. I mean, I've been there. I've been on the other side of the table. I've been the only woman in the room several times. I've been the only like non-white person in the room several times, and it can be really intimidating. And apologies if I get emotional about this, because I do get emotional about this. But remember, you have a place there, okay? You belong there just as much as anyone else does. If you have come to the University of Leeds to study, you have gotten through on your own merit, okay? So that's the first thing you need to remember. You belong, okay? There is a space for you. In terms of what you can do to build your confidence, the biggest thing is be prepared, okay? If you go in knowing your stuff, you're going to be able to project confidence even if you're not feeling confident, okay? And you're going to be able to go in there and really give a cracking interview even if you're not feeling confident. You can show your confidence. The next thing I'd say probably is find role models in your life, okay? If your mother's working, if your aunt's working, if your friend's working somewhere, and talk to them. Talk to them about how you're feeling. Get it off your chest, and also if you talk to people like that, and as well as if you have any professors, if female professors or non-native professors, talk to them. So reach out to your network. I'd say that's really, really powerful, because it'll show you again that there was a space for them too, and they progressed and they have a career now, And then the final thing I'd probably say is be your authentic self, okay? You don't have to pretend to be a confident white man. You should just be you, okay? And if you're a bit nervous and if you make jokes in the interview because you're nervous, then that's fine. That's okay, And if you want to talk about this more kind of personally, one-to-one, I'd be really happy to pick this up separately, because this is a topic that's very close to my heart. It's a kind of piece that I went in thinking, and while it's literally illegal for companies to discriminate against you on the basis of gender, on the basis of race or nationality or any of that, the fact is that it's not necessarily a level playing field. People will come in with certain preconceived notions. If I had a penny for every time someone asked me, oh, how come your English is so good? And I was like, and so, yeah, just reach out to me separately if you want to talk about this further. But yeah, I think the main thing to remember is that remember you do belong. And if you go in prepared, and if you reach out to your network and get, support and reassurance from other people, you will do just fine.
Yeah, thank you very much for that answer and for the question. That's really, really important stuff to talk about. And yeah, thanks for answering it so honestly.
Oh, sorry, I just forgot one thing.
Yeah, of course.
You're in a better position now than I was when I was looking, because the post-study work visa has been reinstituted. So this is a really, really great thing, and you need to take advantage of it as soon as the government kind of releases more detailed guidance about this, because previously the income threshold was so high for a tier 2 visa. I think you had to get like a £30,000 salary, which is like basically unheard of for graduate jobs. And so effectively you were booted out of the country as soon as you finished your degree. So that's not the case at the moment, because they've reinstituted the post-study work visa. So look into that, because the playing field is a lot more level because of that now.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. From not that I would profess to be an expert on that by any stretch. Yeah,
neither am I, but
definitely,
yeah.
definitely the case. Okay, we're past 1:30, so just a reminder that we are still recording this. We've got a bit of extra time, so we are going to carry on for 10 or 15 minutes longer. So we probably will move into some of those more internationally focused questions. So if you do want to leave at this point, that's absolutely fine. And thanks for attending. One of the questions that we got through pre-submitted, and we're getting them in the chat as well, sort of generally generally, is it possible to get a job back in the UK as an international graduate? And do you have an understanding, or what's your understanding of how the new visa system is going to influence opportunities for those from outside the UK?
Yeah, no, so it is absolutely possible. So you have two options. So if you're already in the UK and you're on a student visa, you could transition onto a post-study work visa, and you'll have 2 years then to basically look for work, do whatever, freelance, side gig, full-time job, whatever. The other thing is, if you're not in the UK right now, then you'll have to apply for a tier 2 work visa, which I'd say is probably more difficult to get, particularly at the moment. So your chances of getting a tier 2 work visa in the UK are limited, not impossible, but limited, because there is a limit to the number of visas that they're giving out in any given year. And additionally, I think if you're in an occupation like, let's say, in healthcare or like engineering or that kind of thing, which is basically short-staffed, if that's the right word, then you might have a better chance. But in general, I'd say if you're applying from outside of the UK to come back to the UK to get a tier 2 visa, it's a lot more difficult. One piece of advice that I would say is look up the list of tier 2 organizations, so companies that can sponsor tier 2 visas, and make sure that you don't apply to any companies that are not on that list. Whether that's, whether you're looking to work on a post-study work visa or whether you're looking for a tier 2 visa. So tier 2 visa, literally, it's impossible. If they're not on the sponsorship list, they're not going to be able to give you a job, or the sponsorship letter that you'll need to get the visa. And if you're on a post-study work visa, let's say you want to carry on with the organization after 2 years, or you want to carry on working in the UK after those 2 years have elapsed, it's a lot less headache for you if the company already has the right to sponsor you, because then you can transfer directly from a post-study work visa onto a tier 2 visa, or whatever they're going to call it in 2 years' time, at that point. So in terms of your job continuity, make sure that you really check that sponsorship list thoroughly.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite a few questions coming through about the tier 2 visas and the process for doing that. I know it's all kind of been a bit covered, but do you get a sense that it's still very difficult to get a tier 2 job at the moment? Are there many employers offering those tier 2 visas?
Yeah, they are. It's, the thing with tier 2 visas is that the company needs to prove that they've searched the local market and they haven't found a person to hire, and that's why they're hiring you, right? So that's the biggest challenge, and that's why graduate jobs on a tier 2 visa are really difficult. You're probably more and you probably won't meet the income threshold either, because graduate jobs don't pay as much as £30,000 in most cases. Standalone jobs are probably the better bet in that case, if you're looking for tier 2 sponsorship, because the salary will probably be higher. So if you do have a bit of experience under your belt, or if you're in a kind of job role that would pay slightly higher, like, let's say, I don't know, software development, for example, then yeah, it's not impossible, but it is difficult. And so I'd probably advise you to check your expectations at the door, because it's really, really, really hard to get a tier 2 visa at the moment. I will say this, companies, a lot of companies have paused hiring at the moment because of COVID. But there will come a time, I don't know, nobody knows exactly when that's going to be, but there will come a time when they're going to see a shortfall and they're going to want to hire people again. So make sure that you set up those job alerts on the job boards, set up the job alerts on the company website, so that if there is an opening that is relevant to your skill set and to your interests, that you can really jump on it and apply immediately, because the competition is going to be fierce. So don't leave it until the deadline. Apply as soon as you can. Yeah, that it's very hard. I've tried and I failed to get a tier 2 visa, so it's several times. So it's not impossible. I do have friends who are on the tier 2 visa who are from, you know, India, America. So it's not impossible, but it's super hard.
Yeah, I think that echoes what we hear from our perspective as well.
Yeah.
It's certainly not impossible, but it is important to check expectations primarily for your own good, to be honest, just so you're not disappointed and hurt any more by it than it already will be. Do you have a sense of, is there any difference between, so say there might be people on the call who've been applying for this while they're a student, while they're in the UK, or if they're still in the UK and they're thinking they've got to go back to their home country at some point, on how it differs, if at all, applying for jobs in the UK from your own, from back in your own home country? Is there a difference? Is there any different advice you'd give in that position?
I mean, obviously it's more difficult, right? Because under normal circumstances, you'd meet people, but I guess it's been democratized to some extent now by the presence of COVID, because the hiring process is mainly digital now anyway, right? So there are a lot of companies right now who are moving some of their roles completely, like they're just making them remote permanently, and therefore that opens up their talent pools globally. And so, you know, it's not all gloom and doom. There is an opportunity here for you to look at what remote roles are being offered by companies, you know. So if you're sat in India or whatever, like Indonesia, and you are searching for roles in the UK, I'd say probably broaden your search, like look in other countries as well, because so many companies are going to be offering remote roles right now. Your search doesn't need to be limited to the UK. And the other piece I'd say is that there's not a huge difference, because the content of what you'll be writing in your CV or your application won't differ wildly. But like a really interesting one that I figured out is that, let's say in India, like a 5-7 page CV is quite common. In the UK, like they will throw it out the window the instant they see a CV that long. So like, if you have a really long CV, cut it short if you're applying to European countries. That would be like a practical thing, I'd say, to do. Don't lie about the address. So if you are living in India, like, or wherever, if you're living in your home country, like just say that. That's okay. Because you want to be upfront about who you are, where you are, so that they can make the decision on that basis. Because yeah, if they aren't sponsoring graduates, or if they aren't sponsoring early careers roles right now, then don't waste your time, don't waste their time. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Absolutely agree. So I think we're at 1:45 now, so maybe we'll just do one more question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Before closing. I thought it was quite a nice question to end on, and I've lost it, so my apologies for that. Just let me find it. So just to finish up on it, there was a question from Prachi, who said, what were your challenges and regrets, or things you maybe did or didn't do as an international female student that anyone listening to can learn from?
My biggest challenge was overcoming my own underconfidence. And so I'm glad that I was asked that question earlier, you know, just believing that the odds were stacked against me, which, to be fair, they were. But, you know, believing that, oh, you know, I'm not good enough, or, you know, any of that. So the first piece of advice I'd say is like, stop standing in your own way. Because I applied for jobs in 2 separate kind of instances. So I did one bout of applications in 2014-15. I did another bout of applications in 2017 when I returned to the UK. And my experiences both times were like wildly different, because the second time around I was like, you know what, these rejections don't reflect who I am intrinsically as a person. They just mean that for whatever reason, we're not a good match right now. Like, me and this company aren't a good match right now, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm a failure, doesn't mean that I don't have anything to offer, you know. And so the first thing is just to stop standing in your own way, apply with confidence, particularly if you are a woman. Do you know that women are less likely to apply for jobs that they don't meet like 100% of the criteria for? So don't do that. If you meet all of the required skills, or even 80-90% of the required skills and experience on a job, go ahead and apply, even if you don't have any of that desired pace. Okay. So yeah, like, be confident, be bold when you're applying. And my biggest kind of advantage, I think, the second time around, was that I really played a numbers game. I did 217 applications over the course of 6 months. So, try not to spend 6-7 hours on each application, because you're going to feel the sting when you get rejected, and you will get rejected from most of the jobs that you apply to. So just go in knowing that, because the first time around I didn't know that, right? First time around I was like, yeah, like, I went to a good university for my bachelor's. I got into a Russell Group University in the UK. I'm a good student. I can do this. I can get a job, and then it's like 70 rejections straight out the gate, and it's like, what is wrong with me? And so you can't internalize any of that. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep applying. Be really targeted, really, really strategic in the jobs that you choose to apply to. Don't apply to anything and everything. Apply to things that are relevant to you, relevant to your skill set, to your interests, apply to organizations that excite you, Yeah, and just be really strategic in the way that you handle your applications. Make sure you're tracking everything. Don't miss a deadline. Don't miss an application deadline or a testing deadline because you've lost track of, whatever the 5 ones that you have in process at the moment. So make sure you're tracking your things really, really well. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. There will be people. Yeah, so that's what I really regret the first time around. I was figuring things out on my own, and I was applying. I was just like applying as a whatever candidate with no connections, no nothing, And the second time around, I reached out to my friends and family here in the UK, and I really talked to them about, okay, what are you doing? What are your parents doing? Where do they work? And you wouldn't believe it. The job that I've had for the last 3 years, I got a foot in the door through a referral. My husband's friend's mom referred me to this company, and obviously then I had to get in through merit. Then I had 7 stages of interviews and online assessments that I had to do to get the job, but I did it, and I wouldn't have even known about the opportunity if I hadn't reached out to my network. So it's really crucial that you do reach out and ask. And if you don't have a network already, and again, I'll say this because I do recognize that if you're an international student, you won't necessarily come in knowing people in the country, but that's okay. You can build your network. You've made friends at uni, right? Talk to them, talk to their parents. For all you know, you have, let's say, an alumni network that you can tap into as well, and not just University of Leeds alumni. Think about your school and your school alumni from your home country. Think about your, because many of them might be settled here in the UK. Think about where you did, if you're a master's student, think about where you did your bachelor's. There will be a bachelor's alumni here locally. So be creative and build your network if you haven't already. That will definitely hold you in good stead.
Yeah, fantastic advice, and a really nice way to wrap up today's session. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Sam.
It's been a pleasure. I've mainly been talking at you, but
no, absolutely. That's what you were invited to do. So you did the right thing. As we've put in the chat there, we haven't had time to answer all your questions today, unfortunately. So I'm really sorry about that. If your question hasn't been answered, then please do send it through to me. I'm available at graduatesupport@leeds.ac.uk. That email address will be included in the email we send round. You can also book an appointment with a careers consultant. What Sam was saying just there about don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot of people think that as a graduate, you're not really supposed to use the Career Centre. You absolutely are. That's what we're here for. We have the availability to do that. So please do that. Particularly if you got in touch, I think some of the questions we didn't cover were some of the more specific ones that were covering a specific sector or a specific kind of situation. That's exactly what the one-to-one appointments with a careers consultant are for, where you can spend 20 minutes just chatting to one person and then you can book time to see them again. Sam said to us before that she's more than happy for people to contact her as well. And is that by email or LinkedIn?
You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn if you just search for Sampurna Maitra. I will be happy to talk to you offline.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we include a link to your LinkedIn profile in that email as well, so that if there is anything you want to follow up with her on, Sam's very kindly offered there. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and your attendance, everybody. Yeah, don't hesitate to contact us in the future and look out for more of these in the future, hopefully. Thank you very much, Sam. Bye-bye.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.